So last Tuesday, I had a moment. It was 10:30 at night. My kids were finally asleep. The dogs were finally settled. I made dinner, cleaned up, answered almost a million Slack messages, reviewed a pull request for some reason, and somewhere in there, apparently, I was supposed to fold the laundry. The laundry that had been oscillating between my bed and the floor since the weekend, actually. I had used AI tools all day, meeting summaries, code reviews, drafting emails. My calendar was optimized. My inbox was triaged. I was, by every productivity metric, a highly efficient human being. And yet, the laundry was not folded. It was on the floor, in a pile, being used as a bed by my cat. And I stood there looking at my cat, completely unbothered by the nest of unfolded t-shirts, and I thought, who exactly is AI efficient for? Welcome to Chaotic Commits. I'm Joanne. Honest stories of building in modern tech, the architecture decisions, the career lessons, the hard questions about who builds these systems and who gets left out. I've been writing software for over 15 years. Defense contractors, healthcare AI, a stop at Disney somewhere in the middle. It's a career arc that makes complete sense if you don't think about it too hard. I also have a PhD in computer science, 2 dogs, 2 boys, a cat with an excellent taste in laundry, and not enough hours in the day. That last part is actually what we're talking about today. Let me paint the full picture, because I think the details matter here. I have a family of 4. Me, my husband, and 2 boys. And if you have kids, you already know what I'm about to say. The laundry is endless. It's a philosophical condition. There is no done. There's only caught up for the next 3 hours. The problem isn't washing. Washing is fine. I start a load in the morning. It runs, moves to the dryer. It's fine. The problem is the moment at the end of the day when it has to actually be folded and put away. Because here's what the end of the day actually looks like for me. I work until about 5, and I want to be clear, I have a great partner. This is not my husband doesn't help story. He helps. He does so much. But from 5 o'clock onward, there's dinner to figure out, and the boys have things going on, and the dogs need to go out, and the kitchen has to be dealt with, and by the time all that is done, it's 9:30 or 10, and I am tired in a way that's almost cellular. Not just sleepy, done. And the laundry is sitting on my bed. Now, here's what's funny, or not funny. Depending on your perspective, I have apps for this. I have reminders. I've set up systems. I've tried to do a laundry schedule. I have genuinely optimized this problem the way an engineer would. And none of it accounts for the fact that I am a person who is tired at 10 o'clock, and the thing standing between me and sleep is a pile of clothes that needs to be sorted by person and type, and then carried to 3 different rooms. So what happens? The clothes goes onto the floor. The cat claims them immediately. I get into bed, and I feel briefly like a failure. Before I remember that I ran an entire engineering team today and kept 2 small humans alive, and that's actually quite a lot. But here's what I kept thinking about as I lay there looking at my cat, completely smug in her little fabric kingdom. There are AI tools for everything right now. Truly everything. Meeting notes, code generation, meal planning, email drafting, scheduling, summarization, and I use a lot of them. They do make me more efficient at work. But not one of them has helped me with the laundry. And that's not a joke about wanting a laundry robot. It's a real question about what helpful means and who gets to define it. All right, so let's back up a little bit here. Let me talk about what I actually do for a living for a second, because I think it is relevant. I currently work on a platform that uses AI to help radiologists write reports faster. And this is genuinely meaningful work. Radiologists are overwhelmed. The volume of imaging studies has increased dramatically, and the number of radiologists hasn't kept pace. Burnout is real. Errors happen when people are exhausted. So AI that helps a radiologist generate a report in less time, that has a real downstream impact on patients. That's a real problem being solved for a real person. But here's what I notice in how that work gets discussed. The efficiency gains are measured in time per report, throughput, productivity metrics, and those are important. But what's harder to measure, and therefore easier to deprioritize, is whether the radiologist trusts the output, whether they understand why AI wrote what it wrote, whether they feel more in control in their work or less. Transparency. That's the word I keep coming back to. Not just does it work, but can the person using it understand what it's doing and why? And I think this is a systemic thing. It's not unique to radiology AI, it's everywhere. The AI tools that get built and funded and hyped are overwhelmingly tools that make knowledge workers more productive. Specifically, the kind of knowledge worker who works at a computer in an office with relatively predictable schedule, whose problems are legible to the people doing the building. And that makes sense in one way. Those are the people building the tools. You solve for what you know. But it creates this enormous blind spot because most people are not living that life. Most people have jobs that don't end at 5, or they end at 5 and then immediately another job begins, the domestic one, which is also relentless and also essential and also largely invisible to the people designing the future. The diversity problem compounds itself. If the people in the room building AI tools are largely from similar backgrounds, similar life situations, similar daily realities, then the problems they can see and name are pretty narrow slice of a human experience. My laundry problem isn't really about laundry. It's about the fact that there are whole categories of human labor that are chronically undervalued, predominantly done by women, and almost entirely unaddressed by the AI productivity revolution. The meeting summary got automated. The second shift didn't. And look, I'm not saying this with bitterness. I genuinely love the work I do. I'm saying this because it's a design problem with a design solution. And design problems get solved when the right people are in the room. Which brings me to the most important example I know of what happens when they aren't. In 2018, it came out that Amazon built and quietly scrapped an AI recruiting tool. They spent years building it. The idea was straightforward. Use machine learning to screen resumes and identify the best candidates automatically. Efficient, scalable, objective, or so the thinking went. The problem was that the model was trained on 10 years of historical data, and 10 years of Amazon's historical hiring data reflected 10 years of Amazon's historical hiring patterns, which, like most companies at that time, skewed heavily male. So the model learned that male candidates were preferred. Not because anyone told it that, but because the data said so. It started penalizing resumes that included the word women's, as in women's chess club, women's college. It downgraded graduates from all women's colleges. Nobody designed that in. Nobody sat in the room and said, let's build a system that discriminates against women. They built a system that learned from the past, and the past had a problem, and the system faithfully reproduced it at scale. Amazon scrapped it when they realized it couldn't be fixed. The bias was too baked in. Now here's what I want you to notice about that story. The engineers who built that system were almost certainly smart, well-intentioned people trying to solve a real problem. The failure wasn't malice. It wasn't incompetence. It was a blind spot. If there had been more women in the room when they were designing the training data strategy, if someone had said, wait, what does 10 years of our hiring data actually reflect? The story might have been different. Not guaranteed, but different. That's the room problem. Not that bad people build bad systems. That homogeneous rooms have homogeneous blind spots. And when you build AI on top of those blind spots, you scale them. My laundry app didn't penalize anybody. The stakes were low. But the root cause is the same. A system built by people who didn't fully understand the life it was supposed to serve. So I want to spend a minute of maybe on why I think I can see this problem clearly. Because I don't think it's the PhD. It's honestly actually not the PhD. I think it's the career arc. I worked at Lockheed Martin, a defense contractor, then General Dynamics, which was more of an IT group for the government at that time, Disney World, a golf booking startup, a healthcare software company, a bank, and then an AI healthcare company. And also, I was a professor, and soon I'll be teaching again. That is a weird set of environments, and I've been the engineer in the room for all of them. And here's what that breadth taught me. Every single one of those organizations had a completely different idea of who their user was. At Lockheed, it was the government. At Disney, it was families on vacation. At the golf startup, it was mostly middle-aged men with weekend tea times. And trust me, when your inventory system is time slots, you understand very quickly how that user's assumptions are baked into every design decision. At the healthcare companies, it was clinicians. And clinicians are fascinating users because they're simultaneously highly trained experts and people who are absolutely exhausted and operating under time pressure and emotional weight that most software engineers have never had to think about. Building for a radiologist who's read 200 scans today is completely different than building for a radiologist in the abstract. Each environment I moved through forced me to recalibrate, to unlearn the assumptions of the last place, to ask again, who is this actually for? What does their day actually look like? What are we optimizing for? And is that the right thing to optimize for? I think that's what diverse teams give you. Not just demographic diversity, though that matters enormously, but diversity of experience, diversity of context, diversity of the lives people have actually lived. The engineer who has managed a household and a career simultaneously understands constraints that the engineer who hasn't simply cannot see. That's not criticism, it's just true. And it's fixable by building rooms that contain both. The engineers I've learned the most from across 15 years were not always the most technically brilliant people in the room. They were ones who had seen the most different versions of the problem, who could hold the user's reality in their head while they were still writing code. That's the skill I want this show to be about, not just how to build things for people you aren't. So let me get concrete about what a better version of this looks like, because I don't want to just critique, I want to build towards something. I said earlier that the apps and reminders I tried were optimized for the wrong thing. They assumed the problem was memory, that I forgot, so they reminded me. That would mean problem solved, right? But a system actually designed around my reality would start by asking a different question. Not, when do you want to fold laundry? But when is it actually realistic for you to fold laundry, given everything else that's happening in your life? Not a reminder, a model of my constraints. It would know that Monday through Thursday evenings are essentially unavailable. It would know that I have a window on Saturday most mornings that historically works. It would know that the constraint isn't willingness or memory, it's energy. And that energy is finite. It gets depleted in a specific sequence through my day. That's a transparent system. One that has a model of the user's actual life, not an idealized version of it. One that can say, here's what I understand about your situation, and here's why I'm making this suggestion, not just a notification. Now, I'm not saying that's easy to build. It requires data, inference, a level of personalization that most consumer apps do not invest in. But I argue it also requires something before any of that. It requires someone in the design process who has experienced the problem, who knows what cellular exhaustion feels like at 10 o'clock, who understands that the laundry isn't the problem, the laundry is the symptom. This is what I mean when I talk about transparent systems as a research interest, not just technical explainability, though that matters. The deeper question of whether a system understands the human it's supposed to serve, whether it was built with that human in mind or built for a hypothetical user that was easier to design for. And here's the hopeful part. We're at a moment where tools to build that kind of system actually exist. The question is whether we'll use them to solve problems that are easy to see, or whether we'll push to see the problems that are harder to see because they belong to people who aren't in the room yet. Here's what I actually believe. I'm not cynical about this. The question of who AI serves and who it doesn't is being asked out loud in rooms that used to not ask it. The engineers early in their careers are asking better questions than we ever did. They want to know what the system optimizes for before they build it. They want to think about who's left out of the design. My job, as someone who's been building these things for 15 years and apparently now as a podcast host, is to make sure those questions stay in the room, that they don't get optimized out when there's a deadline or a funding round. And maybe eventually someone builds the thing that knows I need 10 minutes at 7 on Saturday mornings, not a notification at 10:30 on a Tuesday. Until then, the cat is fine. She's thriving, honestly. That's episode 1 of Chaotic Commits. I'm Joanne, honest stories of building in modern tech. New episodes wherever you get your podcasts. I'll see you there.